Hello there! A couple weeks ago, some friends of ours came to us with a couple pounds of plums from their overachieving plum tree. I thought it might be a good opportunity to make a autumn Thanksgiving Plum Saison. So let's talk about how it went. We'll start by collecting our full volume of water, which is 4.8 gallons, run through a carbon filter. Once the water is added to our kettle, we'll go ahead and bump the temperature up to 149 Fahrenheit. This will be our mash temperature for favoring slightly high fermentability. The base malts for this Saison will be 6 pounds of Pilsner malt and 1 pound 8 ounces of wheat malt. For specialty, we'll be using Kara Munich 1 and Vienna, even though it's kind of a base malt. Once we've ensured our grain basket has been added in and we've forgotten to do our water additions, it's time to drop in our grains and stir them up to make sure they're not all stuck together on the bottom. The next step is remembering the water additions and adding them in this ratio of calcium chloride, Epsom salt, and gypsum. This pushes a very dry finish, which is in style for a Saison. While the mash is going for 60 minutes, we'll take some time to get some extra exercise and then return to bump up our temperature to 170 degrees for a mash out. At that temperature of 170 degrees, it's time to pull the grain basket out and let the wort drain back into the kettle. As always, I'll take some of that wort and rinse it back through the grains just to filter everything out and clean it up a little bit more. With everything drained, it's time to start our 60-minute boil. Before the wort actually gets up to boiling, we're going to add some foam inhibitor. This will really help control your hot break, or the expansion of proteins and polyphenols that foam up and sometimes out of your kettle at the start of the boil. Probably the most unnecessary step during my brew day. Once our 60-minute boil has started, it's time to add in some hops. I'll be using 0.75 ounces of East Kent Goldings as the 60-minute addition, as well as 0.5 ounces of Saaz at 15 minutes, and another 0.5 ounces of Saaz at 5 minutes. Finally, after our boil, it's time to hook up our wort pump and our chiller and cool down our wort to around 70 degrees for yeast pitching temperature. After a few minutes of chilling and no stirring, thankfully, it's time to transfer to our fermenter. We'll also steal a sample to check our original gravity, which is mainly to check our efficiency, considering our fruit additions will also affect our alcohol calculation. The yeast we're using today is Imperial's B56 Rustic. This is a Belgian strain that gives a lot of good fruity and juicy characteristics, with maybe a little bit of spicy to balance it out. Our fermentation schedule will be a little bit segmented, but we'll start with 7 days at 69 Fahrenheit. Then it's time to prepare our fruit addition. A friend of ours very generously donated a couple pounds of plums from their overly ambitious plum tree, so we'll wash them off and chop them up before freezing them for a few days. After they're thawed out, it's time to squish them up and then add them to our beer. I usually add fruit additions after primary fermentation has slowed significantly, but not stopped completely. The goal is for the yeast to chew through some of the sugars and help prevent any oxidation from opening the lid and dumping the fruit in. The rest of my fermentation schedule looks pretty standard, with 7 more days at the 69 degrees Fahrenheit and 7 additional days at a 74 degrees Fahrenheit, for which I have to add a jacket and a heater because it's getting a little colder in the house, so everybody's wearing jackets around here. With our fermentation wrapping up, it's time to check our final gravity, which doesn't make too much sense considering the fruit additions. Then it was time to transfer the beer over to the keg, drop it down in the Keezer, carbonate, and enjoy. I probably wouldn't pick plums out as one of my favorite fruits, or even remember it was a fruit if you asked me to list a bunch of fruits, but the flavor with this Saison is really unique and interesting. It's a little bit higher on the ABV, and you can taste it a little bit, which I'm not too much of a fan of, but the plum flavor is nice, and I think it contributes a nice color to the beer. The head retention is really good. There's a little bit of funky, not as funky as some Saisons that I've had, but that's good because I didn't really want it to take over the flavor in this brew. It pairs really nicely with a lot of the Thanksgiving foods that we had, like turkey, cranberry relish. Didn't pair quite as good with the political discussions. Overall, I would love to make this recipe again, maybe use a different fruit. It's always great to get to share a beer with local ingredients with some of your local friends. Not to take anything away from the taste, but that's probably my favorite part about this beer. Cheers!